The scissors made a sound like tearing paper. A dry, final rasp that had nothing to do with the liquid grace of silk. Madame Vexoir held the swatch of polyester between two fingers, her nail a perfect slash of crimson against the cheap, shiny fabric. She was demonstrating a point, and I was the material being dissected. The air in her all-white atelier smelled of heated metal and a perfume so expensive it was aggressive, a scent that didn't blend with the wearer but conquered them. Liam, my fiancé, stood by the window, pretending to be fascinated by the view of a brick wall, his shoulders a tight line of well-tailored cowardice. He had brought me here as a gesture, a bridge between his world and mine. The bridge was currently on fire. "You see, my dear," Vexoir said, letting the polyester scrap flutter to the floor. Her voice was like honey laced with ground glass. "Fabric has a memory. It holds the story of its creation. This," she gestured to the offending swatch, "remembers only a chemical vat and a high-speed loom. It has no soul, no history." She then turned her gaze to the simple, fawn-colored linen dress I wore. I had made it myself. The seams were perfect. The drape was a testament to years of studying how textiles behave. "How utilitarian," she murmured, the compliment landing like a slap. Liam shifted his weight, the leather of his Italian shoes groaning in protest. He wanted me to be pliant, to be impressed, to let this woman mold me into something his family would recognize. "I am a textile archivist. I work with fabrics that remember centuries. I can tell you the region of Flanders a tapestry was woven in by the specific tension of the warped threads. I can identify the mineral used in a 16th century dye by the faint, metallic scent it still holds. My hands understand history in a way Vexoir, with her focus on the fleeting now, never could." I had tried to explain this to her, showing her my portfolio of restoration work on priceless historical garments. She had flipped through it with theatrical boredom. "Charming," she'd said, "a girl with a hobby." Now, she circled me like a shark. "A wedding gown is not utilitarian, Elara. It is a statement of legacy. It announces to the world who you are, where you come from. It is the story of your past and the promise of your future, all woven into 1 inch." She paused, her eyes cataloging every detail of my appearance, my unadorned hands, my practical shoes, my hair pinned back without artistry. "We simply cannot build a palace on a foundation of, well," she waved a dismissive hand in my direction. The word she left unsaid was nothing. I felt a cold spot form in the center of my chest. It was the specific chill of being deliberately and completely erased. Liam finally turned from the window. "Antoinette," he began, his voice placating, "Elara has an incredible eye. Her work at the museum." "The museum is a place for dead things." Vexoir cut him off, her smile never faltering. "I create for the living, for women of substance, of lineage." She turned back to me. "I am sponsoring the museum's gala this year. A massive investment. My name, my brand, is tied to its prestige. The bride of Liam Vandermeer cannot appear in something homespun. It reflects poorly on me, on the family." She picked up a pin from a velvet cushion, her movements languid and precise. "Perhaps we can revisit this when you have a legacy worth dressing. For now, my dear, I am afraid I must decline. My schedule is simply too full to accommodate a project that requires building from scratch." The dismissal was absolute. There was no argument to be had. She wasn't just refusing to make me a dress. She was judging my entire existence and finding it wanting. I looked at Liam, waiting for him to speak, to defend me, to draw a line. He just gave a slight, helpless shrug, his eyes pleading with me to understand his position. And in that silence, I understood everything. The foundation wasn't mud. It was quicksand, and I was sinking alone. The silence in the car on the way back to our apartment was heavier than any fabric. Liam drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He kept clearing his throat, rehearsing speeches he didn't have the courage to deliver. I watched the city slide by, the storefronts and faces blurring into a meaningless watercolor. The cold spot in my chest had spread, numbing my limbs. It was a familiar feeling, a defense mechanism my body had learned long ago. When the world becomes too sharp, you dissociate. You observe it from a great height, a specimen under glass. "She's just from a different world, Elara," Liam finally managed, his voice tight. "Her brand is everything to her. It's all about perception. She thinks I have no history," I said. It was a flat statement of fact. My voice sounded distant, as if it were coming from someone else. Of course you do. You're brilliant. Your work? She just doesn't understand it. She sees names, brands, family trees that are listed in Forbes. And you? I asked, turning to look at him for the first time. His handsome face was creased with worry, but it was the worry of a man trying to manage a difficult situation, not the anger of a man whose beloved had been savaged. What do you see? I see you, he said, reaching for my hand. I let him take it. It felt like a stranger's. But you have to understand, my family. They've been Vexoir clients for generations. My mother would be. It would cause a major incident if we went with someone else, peace over justice. He had made his choice. It was always the choice he made. Keep the waters calm, even if someone is drowning in them. The next few days were a masterclass in subtle cruelty. A mention in a society column appeared, quoting an unnamed design source, who lamented the lack of appreciation for true craftsmanship among the newer generation. It spoke of utilitarian sensibilities clashing with time-honored artistry. The words were Vexoirs, polished for public consumption. Then, at a pre-gala donor event at the museum, one of the board members, a woman who wore Vexoir like a second skin, looked at a priceless bourbon court gown I had just finished restoring and remarked loudly, "It's a shame the original fabrics were so ostentatious. A simpler weave would have been far more elegant, don't you think?" The insult was twofold, a jab at my restoration work and a parroting of Vexoir's utilitarian critique of me. My mentor, Alistair Finch, the museum's head curator, overheard. He was a man who moved with the quiet authority of someone who has forgotten more about history than most people will ever learn. He adjusted his spectacles and addressed the board member. "On the contrary, Beatrice," he said, his voice mild but carrying an edge of steel. "This brocade told a political story. Its ostentation, as you call it, was a declaration of power. Only a true expert can read it. We are lucky to have Miss Vance, who is fluent in such languages." He gave me a small, supportive nod. He saw my value. But he was one man against an ecosystem built on the flimsy scaffolding of Vexoir's pronouncements. The breaking point came a week before the gala. I was in my small office in the museum's sub-basement, a place that smelled of cedar, aging paper, and conservation-grade adhesive. It was my sanctuary. Liam appeared in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "A peace offering. I have a solution," he announced, a little too brightly. "I spoke with Mother. She agrees Vexoir was out of line. But the gala is important. So, she's offered to lend you one of her vintage Vexoir gowns. It's a beautiful piece. Classic. You'd look stunning." He said it as if he were offering a crown jewel. He couldn't see the cage he was presenting. He wanted me to attend the celebration of my own humiliation, dressed in the livery of my tormentor. A final, public surrender. I looked down at my hands, at the faint stains from the archival ink I'd been working with. I thought of Vexoir's perfect crimson nails. I thought of the way Liam had stood by the window. I thought of the borrowed dress, smelling of his mother's perfume in my defeat. The numbness receded, and in its place, a clarity as cold and sharp as a shard of ice began to form. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but the single word echoed in the stone-walled room. "Alara, don't be difficult," he started, the practiced frustration creeping into his tone. "This is a compromise." "No," I said again, standing up. I walked over to my work table, where a small, 18th-century lady's glove lay under a magnifying lamp. The glove was made of kitskin so fine it was almost translucent, embroidered with seed pearls and a pattern of a starling in flight. It was a piece from a collection no one had ever properly catalogued. A forgotten dowry from a minor principality. She said I have no legacy. You agreed with her. I did not, he protested, his voice rising. I just want to keep the peace. There is no peace to be kept, I said, my gaze fixed on the delicate stitching of the glove. There is only what is true, and what is not. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I let him see the coldness in my eyes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. This was the cold pivot, the moment the game changed. I will not be wearing a borrowed dress. He stared at me, confused, as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. He had no idea that I already was. I picked up my phone from the table. I scrolled to a number with no name, only a small, embossed crest as its icon. A crest he wouldn't recognize. I pressed the button. He watched, bewildered, as I turned away from him and put the phone to my ear. It rang once. A quiet, male voice answered, speaking in the old Eldorian tongue. "It is time," I said in that same language. Awake in the loom. The following days felt like living in the quiet eye of a hurricane. Liam and I moved around each other in our apartment with a tense, brittle politeness. He didn't understand what had changed, only that something fundamental had fractured between us. He thought I was merely being stubborn, nursing a grudge. He saw it as an emotional outburst, a problem to be managed. He couldn't comprehend that it was a decision, made with the cool logic of a strategist who has just seen the entire board. He kept trying to fix it, suggesting other designers, other dresses, as if the dress were the point. I would just shake my head, offering no explanation. The less I said, the more agitated he became. His world was built on negotiation and compromise, on smoothing ruffled feathers. My silence was a wall he couldn't climb. Vexoir, meanwhile, was ascendant. Her sponsorship of the gala was her coronation as the city's undisputed queen of culture. Her face was in magazines, her name on the lips of every society figure. There was an interview where she spoke of her process. "I can only create for those who inspire me," she purred to the journalist. "My gowns are conversations. If the other person has nothing interesting to say, what can I do?" The implication was clear. It wasn't a rejection, it was an artistic judgment. I was uninspiring. I was a blank page. I spent my time at the museum, deep in the archives. I found a strange comfort in the silent, ordered history of the place. I ran my fingers over the faded silks and brittle laces, fabrics that had witnessed revolutions and royal successions. They had endured. They had memory. Alistair found me in the vault one afternoon, carefully rehousing a collection of Venetian Reticella lace. He didn't say anything for a long moment, simply watching me work. My hands were steady, my movements economical. "You are not planning on attending, are you?" he finally asked, his voice gentle. "I don't have the appropriate legacy," I replied, my eyes not leaving the delicate needlework. He sighed, a soft, weary sound. "That woman is a vandal, Ilara. She mistakes price for value. Do not let her convince you that you are anything less than remarkable." He paused, looking at the crest on the archival box I was working from, the starling in flight. "An interesting collection, this one. The Eldoria dowry. It was thought to be lost. You have a gift for finding things that do not wish to be found." He looked at me then, a long, searching look. It felt as if he saw something deeper, a flicker of a history I kept carefully hidden. But he didn't press. He simply nodded. "Whatever you decide to do, know that you have my unwavering respect." His words were a balm, a quiet affirmation that my worth wasn't determined in a white-walled atelier. It was earned here, in the silence, among the dead things that had more stories to tell than Madame Vexoir ever would. On the morning of the gala, the sky was a flat, unforgiving gray. Liam had left early, claiming a meeting. He'd left a box on the bed. Inside was a simple but elegant black dress from a department store. A final, desperate attempt at compromise. The tag was still on it. It felt like a flag of surrender. I left it in the box and went to make coffee. I was calm. The fury had been metabolized, transformed into a still, dense core of purpose. I was not going to the gala for Liam. I was not going for Vexoir. I was going for me. I was going to correct the record. At precisely 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was not the familiar buzz of a delivery person. It was a deep, resonant chime that seemed to vibrate through the floor. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty except for a man I had never seen before. He was tall and severe, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit that was closer to a uniform. He said nothing. He simply looked at me, his expression unreadable, and then stepped aside. Behind him, down the long corridor leading to the service elevator, stood 4 more men, equally severe, equally silent. They flanked a large, flat, carbon fiber case, the kind used to transport priceless artifacts. There were no logos, no shipping labels. Just a small, silver crest in the corner, a stylized starling in flight. The royal wardens of the Eldorian Chancery had arrived, and they had brought my legacy with them. The men moved with a silent, unnerving efficiency. They were not movers. They were custodians, their every action imbued with a sense of ritual. They swept the apartment for listening devices, a standard protocol I had forgotten about, before bringing the archival case inside. They placed it not on the floor, but on a portable, climate-controlled stand they assembled in minutes. Liam's surrendered black dress still lay in its box on the bed, a pathetic relic from a life I was rapidly leaving behind. The head warden, the man who had met me at the door, approached me with a slight bow of his head. It was not a bow of servitude, but of respect. "Your Highness," he said, his voice a low baritone. "The loom of stars." As requested, he undid the latches on the case. There was no dramatic flourish, just the quiet clicks of a master lock disengaging. He lifted the lid, and the air in the room changed. The gown inside didn't just lie there. It seemed to hold its own light, a soft, internal luminescence that the gray afternoon light could not diminish. It was made from a fabric that shimmered between silver and the palest blue, like moonlight on water. This was ethel silk, woven from the cocoons of the lunar wing moth, a species bred for centuries by Eldorian artisans and now, tragically, extinct. This bolt of fabric was the last of its kind in the world. The gown itself was deceptively simple in its cut, a column that would flow rather than cling, designed to honor the fabric rather than constrain it. But the details were staggering. It was embroidered with thread of silver so fine it was like captured smoke, forming a map of the northern constellations as they had appeared on the night of the founding of Eldoria. And at the heart of each major star was a tiny, perfectly cut diamond. Not large, flashy stones, but pinpricks of pure light, placed with astronomical precision. It was not a dress. It was a historical document. It was a treasure so far beyond monetary value that the $4 million insurance appraisal was a laughable understatement. It was my birthright. Two women, the royal custodians of the wardrobe, emerged from the group. They were older, their faces serene, their hands moving with the certainty of inherited knowledge. They spoke no words, but began the process of dressing me. It was not the hurried, impersonal experience of a fitting room. It was a ceremony. They handled the gown with a reverence that bordered on worship. As the ethel silk slid over my skin, it felt cool and impossibly soft, lighter than air, yet with a strange, comforting weight. It felt like coming home. When they were finished, they stepped back. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who stared back was someone I recognized, but amplified. The gown did not transform me, it revealed me. It settled on my frame as if it had been woven for me alone, which, in a sense, it had. It was the physical manifestation of the history Vexoir had declared I did not possess. The head warden presented a small, velvet-lined box. Inside lay a single piece of jewelry, a delicate chain of white gold from which hung a pendant, the same starling in flight, crafted from a single, flawless sapphire. As he fastened it around my neck, Liam walked in. He stopped dead in the doorway, his keys slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. He stared, his mouth slightly agape, at me, at the wardens, at the empty archival case. The world he thought he knew, the simple, utilitarian girl he thought he could manage, had just ceased to exist. He wasn't looking at his fiancé. He was looking at a stranger, a queen. Liam couldn't form a coherent sentence. He just pointed a trembling finger at the gown, then at the severe-looking men who were now discreetly packing their equipment. "What? Who? Where did that come from?" His voice was a thin whisper. He looked from the dress to me, his eyes wide with a confusion so profound it bordered on fear. The woman he'd planned to shepherd through a difficult evening in a sensible department store dress was gone. "It's from home," I said quietly. The answer was both perfectly true and utterly incomprehensible to him. "Home? Alara, your home is a two-bedroom house in the suburbs. I've met your parents. They're retired teachers. They are my guardians," I corrected him gently. Not my parents. It was a distinction that had never mattered before. Now, it was the chasm that separated two worlds. The head warden, whose name was Kale, approached. "The vehicle is ready, Your Highness." He used the title without affectation. It was a simple fact, like the time of day. Liam flinched as if he'd been struck. He looked at Kale, then back at me, the pieces clicking into place with an awful, grinding noise in his mind. "Highness," he choked out. I didn't answer him. I simply walked towards the door. The ethel silk whispered against the floorboards, a sound like falling snow. Liam scrambled to block my path. Wait, Elara. You have to explain this to me. What is going on? You wanted me to have a legacy, Liam, I said, my voice devoid of anger. It was a statement of observation. This is it. You wanted me to wear a dress that told a story. This one tells a story that began 1,000 years before your family signed their first stock certificate. The cruelty of the statement was in its precision. I was using their own language, the language of lineage and history, against them. But we're engaged, he said, his voice small and lost. It was the plea of a man who realized he had been playing checkers while the other person was playing a game he didn't even know existed. An engagement is a promise, I said, meeting his gaze. A promise to stand with someone, to defend them, to see them for who they are. I let the words hang in the air. You stood by the window, Liam. It was all that needed to be said. I walked past him. He didn't try to stop me again. The vehicle was not a limousine. It was a black, armored saloon with diplomatic plates, the kind that moves through traffic with an invisible shield of authority. Cale held the door for me. As I settled into the plush leather interior, I saw Liam standing at the apartment window, a silhouette of confusion and regret. He finally understood the bridge between our worlds wasn't on fire. He had simply been standing on the wrong one all along. The journey to the museum was short and silent. I felt no triumph, no giddy rush of impending victory. I felt only a profound and settled calm. The fury had burned away, leaving behind the hard, clean certainty of who I was. I was not there to impress Madame Vexoir. I was there to reclaim a truth she had tried to erase. The gown was not a costume. It was my skin. The entrance to the museum was a chaotic ballet of flashing cameras and valet parkers. Vexoir stood just inside the main doors, greeting her guests like a monarch holding court. She was draped in a column of blood-red satin, a stark, dramatic statement. Her eyes swept over each new arrival, instantly assessing their worth, their clothes, their allegiance to her. When my car, with its conspicuous diplomatic plates, pulled up, it drew a curious silence from the press line. They didn't recognize the crest, which only deepened the mystery. Cale opened my door, and I stepped out. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of camera shutters, a frantic, insectal clicking. The crowd didn't know who I was, but they knew I was someone. The gown did its work. It drank the flashing lights and reflected them back as a soft, ethereal glow. It moved as I walked, not like fabric, but like a current of liquid light. I saw Vexoir's head turn. Her practiced smile was fixed in place. She saw the dress first, a flicker of professional appraisal in her eyes. Then she saw my face. Her smile tightened. She prepared a witticism, a public version of the dismissal she'd given me in her studio. I saw the condescension gathering in her eyes. She started to move towards me, ready to deliver the killing blow, to frame me as a pathetic pretender in a rented fantasy. But as she got closer, her steps faltered. Her professional eye, the one thing she truly trusted, was screaming at her. She could see the impossible fineness of the Ethel silk, the way it held the light. She could see the microscopic perfection of the silver embroidery. She was a creator of beautiful things, but this was something else. This was not created. It felt as if it had been grown or dreamed into existence. Her mind, which only understood the world in terms of price tags and brand names, had no category for what she was seeing. The condescension in her eyes curdled into confusion. At that moment, Alistair Finch pushed through the crowd. He stopped a few feet away from me, his face pale with shock and reverence. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the gown. His eyes, the eyes of a historian, were reading the story it told. He saw the extinct silk, the ancestral star map, the signatory weave of the Eldorian royal loom. He knew. His gaze lifted to the sapphire starling at my throat, the sigil of the royal house. His breath caught. He did the only thing his deep, instinctual knowledge of history would allow. He bowed. Not a deep, subservient bow, but a short, sharp inclination of the head. A bow of recognition. A bow to history made manifest. "Your Highness," he said, his voice clear and steady, carrying through the sudden hush. "Welcome. We are honored." Every head turned. The word hung in the air, electric and unbelievable. "Highness." Vexoir froze. Her face, a carefully constructed mask of serene power, began to crumble. It was a geological event in miniature, a slow-motion collapse of tectonic plates. Disbelief. Annoyance. Dawning, sickening horror. She looked from Alistair's bowed head to my calm face, her mind racing, trying to find a foothold of logic. It couldn't be. This was the little museum girl. The girl with no legacy. The girl in the utilitarian dress. Alistair, for heaven's sake, don't be so dramatic, she trilled, her voice a little too high, a little too sharp. She forced a laugh. It's a costume party, not a coronation. She turned to me, her eyes glittering with a desperate malice. A remarkable replica, my dear. Truly. The detail is astonishing. Where on earth did you find such a clever seamstress? It was a valiant, last-ditch effort to reclaim control, to put me back in the box she had built for me. I met her gaze. I felt the cool weight of the sapphire against my skin. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. They are not seamstresses, I said, my voice carrying the quiet authority of an undisputed fact. They are the royal custodians of the wardrobe. And this is not a replica. I lifted my hand and lightly touched the sleeve of the gown, the fabric cool and alive beneath my fingers. This is spun Ethel silk, the last of its kind in existence. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. You would know that if your pedigree included actual knowledge, Madame Vexoir, and not just a curated list of clients. I had used her own weapons against her: legacy, knowledge, authenticity. Her entire brand was built on being the sole arbiter of these values. And I had just revealed a truth so profound it made her entire world look like a cheap imitation. Her face went slack. The color drained from it, leaving behind a waxy, gray pallor. The blood red of her dress suddenly looked garish, theatrical. She was the replica. She made one last, desperate move. Her hand started